There was a time, not too long ago, when spotting a red and white sign with that little chef tipping his hat meant one thing. You'd found a proper stop. Not just for tea or bacon butties, but for a bit of peace, a warm welcome, and a break from the brutal British motorway miles. From the 60s to the early 2000s, Little Chef wasn't just a chain of roadside diners, it was part of the journey, especially for lorry drivers. It was the one place you knew you could pull in, stretch your legs, get something hearty on a proper plate, and not feel like you were just another wallet on wheels. But blink now and they're all gone. Empty shells, boarded up units, a ghost of a brand that once had nearly 450 locations scattered across the UK. So what on earth happened? How did Little Chef, once a national treasure, a symbol of long-haul comfort and the unofficial canteen of every British trucker, fade into obscurity? To understand it, you've got to go back to the early days. Little Chef kicked off in 1958, just a tiny roadside stop in Reading. Inspired by American-style diners, it was meant to be quick, easy, and consistent. And it was. Pancakes, fry-ups, chip butties, and mugs of builder's tea so strong your spoon stood up straight. The menu didn't try to be clever. It was dependable. And for drivers, especially in the early motorway boom years of the 60s and 70s, that was gold. See, this was before service stations had names like Welcome Break or Moto, with overpriced paninis and barista coffee. Back then, it was grim sandwiches, dodgy vending machines, or a Little Chef. So lorry drivers, coach tourists, families on holiday, they all piled in. The car parks were full of wagons lined up bumper to bumper, their drivers slumped over breakfast plates, catching a breather between runs. For a while, things were good. The brand grew. It became iconic. Every major A-road or motorway seemed to have one. And it wasn't just about food. It was about routine, familiarity. You knew the layout. You knew the staff would call you love or mate, depending what end of the country you were in. And you knew you'd walk out full and caffeinated for under a fiver. But the cracks started showing in the 90s. Ownership kept changing. One day, it was under Trust House Fort, then Granada, then Palmyra, then again and again. And with each new owner came a vision, a revamp, a rebrand. One lot wanted to turn it posh, another stripped it back. Menus changed, uniforms changed, prices crept up. But the building stayed the same, tiny, boxy, outdated. And while the world outside was moving into pret-a-manger and drive-thrus, Little Chef was still flogging the Olympic breakfast like it was 1984. Then came competition, and it hit hard. Motorway services expanded, McDonald's popped up at every junction, Costa Coffee arrived, Starbucks, Greg's. Suddenly, the idea of pulling into a Little Chef for a full English felt slow, outdated, especially when you could grab a sausage roll in 2 minutes flat and be back in the cab before the tacho even noticed. And for drivers, it got harder too. More restrictions, less parking, no easy in and out without clashing with a coachload of pensioners arguing over tea cakes. Some Little Chefs started banning HGVS altogether, blaming tight spaces and insurance issues. That, right there, was the death knell. The very people who helped build its reputation, the lifeblood of its customer base, were being turned away. By the late 2000s, the brand was limping. In 2005, there were still about 235 Little Chefs left. But the soul had gone, they weren't looked after, carpets were sticky, menus were tired, and reviews online weren't kind. Overpriced, grim, stuck in the past. It didn't matter how much nostalgia the name carried, people stopped coming. There was one last big push in 2009 when celebrity chef Heston Blumenthal got involved. Yep, that Heston. Molecular gastronomy, liquid nitrogen. He tried revamping one Little Chef near the A303, giving the place a flashy new look and a modernized menu with slow-cooked beef and triple-cooked chips. For a hot second, it looked like a comeback. The trial site got national press, people were curious, but when it came to scaling that across a crumbling empire of underfunded, outdated locations, the idea fell flat. By 2012, most of the remaining outlets were being shut or sold. The brand got snapped up again, this time by Euro garages, but the magic was long gone. One by one, the signs came down, fryers were unplugged, coffee machines silenced, and those little chef statues that once waved cheerily from roadside car parks disappeared like ghosts in the fog. But for the drivers who remember, the story isn't just about pancakes or toast racks, it's about camaraderie, shared tables, early mornings with rain on the windscreen and the smell of bacon drifting through the doorway. It's about the last proper cup of tea before hitting the A1 in the dead of night. And it's about a time when roadside food didn't come in a paper bag with a drive-through sign. The final years of Little Chef were like watching a once great lorry engine slowly cough its last on the hard shoulder. The signs were still there, but they didn't shine like they used to. A handful of sites struggled on through the 2010s, kept alive by habit more than loyalty, but the spark, that warm buzz of familiarity, gone. Euro garages, who bought the brand in 2017, weren't in it for nostalgia, they were in it for real estate. And when they looked at those tired red-roofed diners, they didn't see pancakes and mugs of tea. They saw prime land for Starbucks, Greg's, and Subway. So one by one, the chefs were replaced with coal counters and coffee chains. The diners were gutted, stripped, and rebranded. Some were demolished entirely. It wasn't personal, it was business. But for those who spent years pulling in, clocking off, and tucking in, it did feel personal. Because Little Chef was never just about food. It was about familiarity, about knowing what you'd get at any hour, on any stretch of the A roadmap. And for British truckers especially, it was one of the few constants in a job defined by change. The weather, the traffic, the loads, they all shifted. But Little Chef? That stayed the same. In truth, the writing had been on the wall for a long time. The UK's eating habits had changed. Speed was king. People didn't want to sit down and wait for a hot plate of bubble and squeak. They wanted food now, in a bag, with a drive-through and contactless. And service stations adapted. McDonald's sprouted like weeds across the network. Costa took over the high ground. And lorry drivers? Well, they went where the parking was wide and the bacon rolls were under £1. So what's left now? Not much. A few die-hard fans have tried to salvage the legacy. There's a Little Chef museum, yes, really, tucked away in a private collection. And every now and then, you'll spot an abandoned building on a rural bypass, still wearing its faded colors like an old soldier's uniform. The sign might be cracked, the windows dusty, but the silhouette is unmistakable. And if you listen close, just past the rumble of the dual carriageway, beyond the hiss of the taco winding down, you can almost hear the clink of forks on porcelain, the hiss of a flat-top grill, and the murmur of a tired driver saying, "Go on then, I'll have the Olympic." The thing is, nothing's really taken its place. Sure, there are more food options than ever, more chains, more apps, more experiences, but nothing feels like yours. The modern road stop is efficient, clean, and sterile. You're processed, not served. You eat, not dine. There's no character, no mismatched tablecloths, no one asking if you want an extra sausage for 50 pence. It's all slick, fast, forgettable. And maybe that's the tragedy of it. Little Chef wasn't perfect, the food wasn't gourmet, the service could be slow, but it was real. It was woven into the landscape of British motoring, into childhood holidays, into long hauls and late nights, into the quiet satisfaction of pulling off the A road after 5 hours behind the wheel, sliding into a booth, and knowing, just knowing, that you were in the right place. Some drivers still talk about it like it was a mate they lost touch with. "Remember the one outside Carlisle?" they'll say. Or, "Best chips I ever had were in the Cheltenham branch." It becomes folklore, a bit romantic, sure, but that's the point. It meant something. Today, there's a gap on the roads where Little Chef used to be, not just in buildings, but in spirit. Nobody stepped in to fill it properly, and maybe they never will. Because what made Little Chef great wasn't just the food or the branding, it was the timing. It was born when Britain was building, expanding, driving forward, when roads were new and long-haul life was rough and unpredictable, and it filled a very real need. Warmth, familiarity, and a fried egg done just right. It served its purpose. And when that purpose shifted, when the world became faster, colder, and less patient, Little Chef didn't stand a chance. But for every driver who ever slid into a red plastic booth, steaming with sweat after fighting through snow on the M62, there's still a place for it. Not on the roadside anymore maybe, but in memory, in the stories, in the smell of cheap coffee in a flask, or the way a full English still hits differently when you've been driving since 4 in the morning. They may have taken down the signs, but Little Chef didn't vanish. It just moved into legend, somewhere between the turning of the tachograph and the warmth of a fresh plate. And if you're lucky, you'll catch a glimpse of it the next time you pull over and remember what real road food used to feel like.